Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. And welcome back to another Friday Habit. We're just crushing it here in the Friday Habit Zone. And today I got a special guest. We have Patti B. Johnson on the podcast. Welcome, Patti.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so you've done a lot of things in your life. You've been a CEO and you've exited companies, and you've written a book, Make Waves, Be the One to Start Change at Work and in Life. And this helps individuals take action, embrace discomfort, and lead meaningful change. So I would love to hear a little bit about just your journey and your career of what brought you to this place to kind of write this book. Where did you grow up? What kind of life did you imagine yourself having when you were just little Patti out there in the fields, playing with the
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a big question, Mark. Okay. So I grew up small town Oklahoma.
Okay. Boomer Sooner?
No.
Oh, okay.
I went to Oklahoma State. I was a huge OU football fan, like everybody else in Oklahoma. But I got this great leadership scholarship to Oklahoma State. My parents kind of explained, football, you're not going to be on the team, so maybe we're going to take scholarship. And it was great. I had all good. But I could never have envisioned doing what I'm doing. I mean, let's be clear. I didn't know. My little world was teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So my story was, then I kind of I ended up, I moved to Dallas, I started working for Accenture, which is Anderson Consulting, big old management consulting company. And that kind of shaped me, and helped me figure out how to work, how to do stuff well. And then I gradually started my own business, which I look back, can't even believe I did that.
Yeah. So what was starting your own business like, as far as, what led to that, and what was that leap?
Took me a minute. I'm not a high risk person. I'm one of these, gotta have my act together, gotta be right, it's gotta be good. So it took me probably 3 years. And so for me, it was kind of the convergence. I was a young mother at the time. I was also very ambitious, which, you can feel like I have this congruence of just all these things. I wanted to have a big career. I wanted to be involved. I was in a job that was a global job at Accenture. I was traveling more than I wanted to travel. I was constantly, can't do that, need to do this. So I was managing, juggling, spinning the plates. And so I kind of kept thinking, there's got to be a better way for me to do all this. And so it was a little bit, and then I kind of thought, I can do this stuff. I could probably give this a try.
Yeah.
So I started, and one of the things I've encouraged other people starting their business. My leap was I set up all the little safety net around me so I feel real cozy and good. So I sort of said, this is a year experiment. I save money. We kind of set aside very moderate income goals, very moderate client goals. So I started a consulting business, right? Change in the people consulting business. And I thought, at the end of the year, I'll know. And so I made it as easy as possible for myself to take the leap. And then at the end of the year, it's like, this is fun. I like it. Let's keep going. So, and even then I thought, maybe in 5 years I might go back and have a big job. But then it just never played out that way. But for me, looking back, that is one of those times I think, how did I ever even think I could do it? So that's what started that chapter of my life.
And I feel like that happens to a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that want to do their own thing and want to start their own business or take their side hustle and turn it into a full-time thing. And so I think there's three camps, right? There's one is someone who is always going to start, and they're like, okay, once I have this security, once I have this enough money saved up and whatever, then I'll do it. But then that time never comes. Correct. And then, I was kind of in that boat when I first started Brand Viva. I had decided in the kind of the end of the summer of 2015 that I was going to start Brand Viva. So we came up with the name, and I was like, all right, now as soon as I had 3 kids, a mortgage, and a lot of responsibility. And so I was like, okay, as soon as I have that security built up, then I'll take the leap. And I got laid off the first week of January of 2016, no severance, no savings. So it was like,
my
yeah, it
gosh.
was like, oh crap, I guess
Well,
I'm
this is
just going to
not the
go all in
plan.
on my side hustle. Yeah. And here we are a decade later, and it all worked out, but I think that is one of those, there's probably people like you said who have the energy for risk or the guts for risk, who can just take that leap and just like, we'll figure it out. And then there's people who want to be a little bit more methodical, a little bit more prepared before doing that. But I just always hate that there is that realm of people who are always preparing, and it's just that perfection robs them, over that progress.
There's never going to be the perfect time.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I mean, and I'm sure probably some of your listeners, people like, I knew I was always going to start a business. I mean, I was never like that. Never, never, never.
Did you grow up in an entrepreneur family
Oh my gosh, no.
Oh, okay.
Definitely no. No, very moderate family. My dad worked at Conoco. My mom worked her way up to be a manager of a local business. No, I had no clue even. I didn't even know a job like my career would even exist.
Yeah.
But after I had been at Accenture a while, I was learning. So that I felt like, you know what? I had enough of a safety net. And I always thought, okay, if after a year doesn't work, I can go back. So was that mentality help me take the risk? Because I do think you're right. I was at a point where I'm going to have to just take the leap and see how it goes. Because I mean, obviously, that's one of the things in the book. Like perfectionism, if you're an entrepreneur and trying to build a business, it's going to absolutely kill you because it's never going to be that way.
Exactly. It'll never be perfect. Yeah. I have a few friends that are always like, I'm just getting my website up and I'm just waiting for this. It's like always like, okay, I'm like, you know what? You've been saying that for like 5 years. Like you just need to just start.
You got to do it. You got to begin. Start with something small for sure. The other thing I think might be relevant to say here, I'm thinking about other people that are starting their business. For me, being the person that I am, I do try new things. I am open to change, but I'm also managing. I want to be kind of like thoughtful about it. Yeah. So what I did is my theory, anytime I'm doing something new, is I like research the heck out of it. Then at some point, then my intuition will kick in. I'll be smarter. And not everybody that you talk to is going to give you advice that's helpful to you. So, but getting more information makes my instincts feel better, more sound, like not just like a gut feel flying by the seat of your pants. So that was the other thing that helped me get started, is talking to a lot of people, getting a lot of information, just everything I could put my hands on.
Yeah, that's really important to find other people who are doing some of the things that you're interested in doing and talking with them and picking their brains, because it instills a lot of confidence in us. And part of this show too is I want to encourage people to say, hey, you're not so far from where you want to be, and you have what it takes within you to be successful. And so sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. And then the other thing I think is that research is kind of the fun part. It's like it's the honeymoon period, right? Where you're like Googling things and you're finding out all this new information. It's like, spend your time like really diving deep into that research and doing the discovery.
And I also found research was better when I was talking to people who had that experience, that they knew me or they knew what I was trying to do. In other words, it was a more interactive conversation than, because you can research and research and research, and the next thing you know, you're still researching.
Right, exactly.
And so for me, out talking to people, and the other thing that I learned, everybody, like, I'm always super interested, like, how did you begin? Like, you were asking me that question. How did you first start? 9 times out of 10, people are like, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know. Or I like you guys, he's like, I had no choice, right? I was thrown in. And so I think that also can help you think, not everybody, you always see people where they are. And
you think, they had something given to them or whatever. Yeah. No. I always tell my kids, I say, fake it until you become it.
Yeah.
there's an element of, it used to be, fake it till you make it kind of thing. But the thing is I learned is that I just faked it long enough, and then I just knew everything, and then I just became the thing that I was, faking. So
Exactly. So in the early days, I mean, those were things that sort of helped me start going.
yeah. How big did you grow the company?
Well, the company we ended up probably having 50 or 60 consultants at any point
Okay.
in time
Yeah.
on our projects. And the interesting thing is our network was all large companies. Like that's the people that we knew, that's
Yeah.
where they had gone to the Fortune 500, even down to
Right.
Fortune 10. So we were pretty good size. Ended up being acquired by a private equity firm. We were good size for where we started from.
Right. Right.
And so scaling up and learning how to do that was one of the
Yeah.
things I learned
When
along the
you were first starting out, were you a head of sales, and were you kind of
way.
the person who's in charge of everything?
No, no. And that was actually one of the big things was when I was at Accenture, I was in a big job, but I was never in sales except I was part of what we call BD teams. But at that point, these are like multi-million-dollar contracts. You
Right.
don't roll in yourself. Usually you're on a team of 5 or 6 people talking to a potential client. I also had internal responsibilities during
Right.
my career there. So I had both and sometimes both at the same time. No. In fact, that was my biggest learning because you get all this. I mean, the other thing I really learned, of course, I was in a service business, consulting business, right? All these people give you advice like, well, this is how you have to sell and you need to go out
Yeah.
and you need to get your pitch ready. And I was like, oh,
Always be closing.
yuck, that's not really me. And then I kind of realized one of the best pieces of advice I got was from someone who doesn't matter who it is, but her advice was people will buy from and call you in for projects, people that they like to work with and people they trust. And
Yep.
trust is not just integrity, it is integrity, but it's also I
Yeah.
trust what you're doing.
Right.
And I'm kind of thinking, nah, I'm a more relationship kind of person. And then I found my footing, but I kept thinking I'm doing this wrong. I don't know how to do this because everybody would give you all these sales tips.
Right.
We're just like, ugh, that's not really me,
Yeah, totally. Know, like, and trust. I think those are the 3 keys. And yeah, it's like one of those things where I go to a lot of networking events and I meet people, and really that's my sales strategy. Because I'm not a hard closer. I'm not somebody who's like, I'm like, listen, let's get to know each other. If you like me, let's do business together. Like if I can help solve a problem that you have, like that's great. If not, that's fine too. But yeah, there's so much stuff online of like, just the hard close, the pitching, how to overcome objections, like all this stuff. I was like, no, thank you. That is just not my jam at all.
Not my jam. And there's so much clutter on that. And then if you're not comfortable doing that, you think I don't know how to do it. Instead, you realize, well, actually, you probably do. You're just not relying on those instincts of building relationships and being helpful and being interested. And, there is an art to, I think, turning a general conversation into, well, here's some ideas and maybe we could help on this, or without being too salesy. But I kind of found my footing, but it's not easy because, like you said, there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't. I'm sorry, no.
Yeah. The ABC always be closing. Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, coffees for closers.
No, I mean I can't. Maybe maybe in certain fields.
So then you hit the ground running. You have a family. You are taking care of kids, and you're also trying to grow a business. So what were some of those hard things earlier on that you encountered, and then what were the solutions to those? Like, did you start hiring? Like, were you able to pull some clients that you were working with to kind of come follow you, or did you just have to?
Against the rules, can't go do.
Oh, you can't do that. Okay, so
bad. So, but what I did is I did find 2 right straight away. First off, I started just myself because I thought, okay, I need to figure out, am I going to want to do this?
Right.
But I got 2 long-term projects straight away. And that really helped me kind of get my kind of foundation. I always encourage people that are starting a business, find some foundation, find some client, some relationship, something that can kind of give you a baseline to just get you going. So, that was one. I think, and it's funny, talking about early days, one of my things I had to get past, if you're starting a business, you got to get rejection. Sorry, you're going to have it. You're going to have people that don't care what you're doing. They're disinterested.
Or people that that you think should work with you and they don't. And you're like, how come you didn't call me? How come you didn't hire me? Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, I had been in a pretty big job. I was used to having my calls returned. And all of a sudden it was kind of like, what? Hello?
Yeah.
Did you get my email? And then you realize that's part of what you're doing now, right? You are not everybody's top priority. You are not, you're just, people will call you if and when they want to, and you can be helpful. So I think toughening up a little bit and not taking rejection personally. I also, I think kind of related to that, learning to look over a little bit longer time horizon. You're gonna have a bad day. There's gonna be a project you thought, this client is it's a done deal. And the client then is gonna call you and say, we've decided not to do it. I mean, that's just a day in the life. But early on, it can really like kick you in the tail. And so I think I had to think a little longer term. And like my first year was like, I'm gonna give this 12, 18 months. So that helped me at the beginning when you did have those setbacks to say, let's see how it goes. Yeah. But you cannot get sucked into everything that doesn't go your way, because just expect it. There will be things that won't go your way, Yeah,
I think for better or for worse, for myself, I've always had kind of a positive mindset. It was funny. My daughter was asking me the other day, like, how come you never have a bad day? And I was like, listen, I could look at my day and tell you that, I had this blow up with this client and, my battery died on my car and, all this happened. I could focus on that, or I could say, you know what? I woke up in a beautiful home and my family's healthy and, my business is doing okay. And, I could think of those things and then look back on my day and say, yeah, I had a pretty good day, and so I really think it's just a mindset of framing of how you look at what you're doing. And I think it always helps the person who's starting a business or trying to do something to try to have that my glass is half full kind of mindset, because things are going to go wrong and things will get discouraging. But if you look at the positive things within your day and throughout your life, things will just be better than they are worse.
Yes, and I think some people can naturally do that, others can't. So I always encourage people to know what your triggers are, right? Know what you're carrying around in your little personal backpack. So for me, I am far from perfect, but I'm kind of a perfectionist. I want things to be right. And so that's a watch out if you're an entrepreneur, because they aren't always going to be. And it can cause you from taking risk, or it can cause you from trying new things. So I always encourage people, know kind of what your triggers are. What are those things that give you anxiety, and know them so you can try to manage around them, because sometimes it's staying positive is a hard thing to do if you're not naturally kind of that's who you are. So I kind of going out of the other way, what are those things that you need to manage, whether it's approval, like rejection is I want approval. I want people to like me. I want people to think I'm great. Well, they aren't always going to when you start a business and you're out there interacting with clients or the public customers, whatever it may be. So if that's the case, you have to kind of work on that. So I think that's an important thing. On the flip, stay positive. Yes. Yeah. Watch out. What are those things that are going to pull you under or cause you to not have that confidence,
Totally. Mm-hmm. So what was the main function of People Results? What did you do? And what was the service that you were providing?
We were a consulting company and focused on change and learning. So as an example, if a company was reorganizing or they were acquiring another company or going through a major change, all in the people arena. Like, how do you make that change happen? How do you change build better capability with your leaders? All those kinds of things. So it was typically starting with, what's your business problem and how do we help you fix it? Some smaller projects, some bigger ones. So, and we did some advisory and coaching stuff too, but it was all in the people space, really around how do you help companies, achieve their business objectives. And we have a wide range of projects that all in that space.
What was your main source of networking or like business growth? Like, how did you meet people, or did you do a lot of marketing? Like, what was your strategy? It's all word of mouth.
We were very relationship-based business, meaning we want you as the client to refer us. We want you to have us back. So in other words, a lot of, continued back. Also, stay in touch with people. Who are those people that that you want to have a connection with, that are in companies that, might be helpful to you, and you can be helpful to them too. Always that mindset. But we didn't really do much formal marketing. In fact, I had friends who, probably with the expertise that you have, that said we should have done more, and we should have. Now, what we did do, I started a podcast. We did a lot on LinkedIn. We wrote, we did blogs, we were guests on podcasts. So we viewed, our theory on marketing was be content rich. Share information, share knowledge that's helpful to other people. Don't be out spamming people with, 40 emails, a week.
Right.
Be strategic, be a thought leader, be a thought partner. Kind of like, so that was always our filter on where we wanted to spend our time. And that mattered because people want to see someone that they have expertise, they have knowledge, they're relied on by other people. That, to me, we always call them credibility boosters. Those are things that, okay, well, they know how to do this. You know what I mean? It's a shorthand, much more than some, here's an email.
I agree. It's like, how do we provide value back to people without asking for anything in return? And
that's right.
Because of that, a lot of times that return comes back to you.
Yeah, agree. And I'm sure you're the expert on that. And, but that's like, finding that magic, and also being true to yourself, like who you are, back to the sales thing. You gotta do your thing. You can't be trying to, can't try to become something you're not.
Totally.
Find your core, know what you're trying to offer, know what your purpose is out. And it's overstated a lot, but I do think if you kind of get that centered, then all the marketing stuff sort of falls into place around that,
Yeah, be confident in who you are.
Yeah.
I think earlier on, you always compare, and they say, comparison is a thief of joy, because you see somebody else like, oh, well, they're doing this and they're doing that. Mm-hmm. But then you have to realize that, like, you're a unique person, and like nobody can be you. And you can try to be other people or try to, mirror or copy somebody else. But at the end of the day, it's like what the world needs is somebody to be authentic to who they are and provide that value back to the world.
Completely. So, hard thing to know sometimes, or to let ourselves know that, but important. Otherwise, you kind of end up doing and being something you really wanted,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then at what point were you thinking like, all right, it's time for me to exit this puppy and, move on?
I'm also an overthinker. I'm sharing all I have many thoughts. I'm an overthinker. So I started very early on, because one of the things that I had seen a couple of friends who were pacing 5, 7, 10 years ahead of me. They had built this wonderful business, and then it was time for them to either exit or step back. And guess what? Their business just kind of fell off a cliff.
Right.
Because they were the
business. Yeah.
Right. So for me, I had been thinking about that for a very long time, because I felt like for me, it would be more of a step back. Like I knew I never saw myself doing like the spigot. Like it's not like they're in some companies where you retire and you get to go watch and bye-bye and you're done. Yeah. I thought, you build your own business, it doesn't really work that way. So I started thinking about it, probably 7, 8, 10 years out, because I had seen you don't prepare for that overnight. The other interim step that didn't really happen related to my wanting, eventually stepping out, was I built, like, we created a partnership with other people other than me who were invested in the business. Very important step in terms of our scaling and growing, because that was a decision point for me. Do I want to continue to kind of be the main event on everything? And part of me, I wanted colleagues. I wanted to be around other smart people.
Right.
And so that was an interim step that really kind of then that set the stage for when I decided that, I knew that it was going to be the right time to, and I also looked at it there was never a date. Oh, this is the date when I'm going to step back or I'm going to do less. It was more try to create the circumstance that will allow that.
Yeah.
And then, the right thing kind of emerged, but that's a big old fat topic. But,
Yeah.
but that's, it's really more, I believe, I encourage people 8-10 years out, start thinking about what is it that you want when you built something, what's going to feel right for you? Is it going to feel right for you to close up and say, that was fun? Probably not. If you build something that's sustainable, what will that look like? And there's a million different answers, but important question, because you can't prepare that. That's not a year-long gig. I mean, that's a multi-year effort,
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. That I agree. And I kind of went through something similar as far as like, I started out of necessity. It was like, okay, I just need to start taking jobs, like making things work, and then as I've grown and have, W-2 employees and, several 1099s and like all this stuff, I'm thinking like, all right, like what's my exit strategy? Like, I've worked myself out of all the doing, and now I just focus on, business development and whatnot. But in the same way, it's like, okay, could my kids maybe take over the company? Like maybe they might be interested in, I could bring them in to do stuff or, whatever that might look. And so it's something that's important to have that thought, because I think so many times we get caught up in the work and the doing that we don't think about, how do we exit this, or how do we move, like what would be the next phase? You just wake up, like you were saying, people just wake up one day and it's like, oh crap, like I want to leave. Now what? No. And yeah, it's too late. Yeah, exactly.
The way we always talked about it is with my other partners, we kind of said, okay, our strategy is really 3 strategies, and we're going to try to see if all 3 can actually be viable. 1, do nothing. Keep going. At some point, I step back, no change. Second would be maybe we have some investors. Maybe we have somebody who helps, because we knew at some point we'd already at the point where it was time for more growth and investment. Or the third might be acquisition. And we sort of said, any of those 3 in the right circumstance might be appealing. But let's make sure we don't unknowingly cut off any one of those as an option just because we didn't think about it. Yeah. So that's the way we looked at it, honestly. Because if you do want to ever have investors or potentially be acquired, you do certain things because you know what matters in those situations.
Well, that's the biggest thing with, Ben, my co-host on the show, who hasn't been on the show for a long time. Ben, if you're listening, he's been
Where
traveling.
Are you, Ben?
He's all over the world. Last time we chatted, he was in Thailand.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think I'm going to see him tonight. Actually, we're doing like a virtual game night.
Oh,
so,
fun.
But yeah, but he sold his business, and so we're going to do a whole episode of talking about that journey and whatnot. So yeah, it should be really good. But some of the things he's talked about is just that the whole idea of even just having your books and everything else in order, so that when the time comes, you have all the documents and all the receipts and all these other kind of things that an investor or someone who's going to buy the business wants. And so it's like that caused him so much headache over like several month period to get all that stuff going. And so he's like, all right, on the next one, I'm going to make sure that I do all these things and I'm prepared for that if that, opportunity ever comes around. So
For sure. There's many, many things. That's a whole topic in itself of
totally.
Not relying too much on one client, have consistent growth, have clients that have committed to the future. So you have a good run rate. There's a million things that you do that put you in the best opportunity, whether you choose to do it or not. That's the way we always looked at it. If the right opportunity came up, great. If it doesn't, we're okay because we have other options that we're in good shape for,
Yeah.
Huge topic.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's been a big thing, even as an agency, that I've had to learn over the years where, a few years ago, 3 of our clients was, probably over half of our income. And so I was like, wait a second.
There you go.
If one of these people don't renew their contracts, that's going to be bad for the business. So how do we diversify and all that? Yeah. And so that's been kind of a learning curve for sure and a growth opportunity for us. But again, it's all those things that you learn along the way and then hopefully can share with somebody else so that they, don't make the same mistakes.
Oh, big time. And that's smart that you're, because really we talked about, diversify. That was like that was the most common word for several years of, let's get out in multiple industries because we were industry agnostic and, don't concentrate, even though the risk, I think sometimes people who own businesses is but the opportunity is there with that. They've got that one big client that represents 40% of the business and they still want more and more and more.
Yeah.
You got to figure out how to give them more and more and more while also focusing on the other stuff too. And the other keep those new opportunities. It might mean you need to bring in more contractors, you need to hire more, whatever. But if you go for all the, whatever, the quarters on the ground too long, you're going to pay the price for it when that client gets, budget cuts, guys.
Right.
Sorry, it's been fun. No, you don't want it.
Yeah. That's good. That's good advice.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Make Waves.
Yeah.
It's the second edition.
It is the second edition. Yeah,
Okay.
I wrote the first edition probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
And I'll stop there. So where do you want to go on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd just be curious. So you wrote it 7 or 8 years ago, and what was the purpose behind writing it? Like, what did you see in the market, or did you see a lack of that? You're like, you know what, I'm going to write this book about this.
It was kind of a combination of I'd always wanted to write. I enjoy writing. I enjoy writing articles still and doing that kind of thing. I had always wanted to do it, and I had a bunch of stuff in my head. I mean, I was, you watch doing what we do, like with consulting, you get to see everybody up close, usually in high stress situations, like big changes. And then I also kind of started to realize, actually it's human behavior. And you watch some of these people leading big changes in an organization, not that different than maybe some of the changes you and I are experiencing as individuals. It's all human behavior. And so I started to get super interested. I had a bunch of thoughts rolling in my head. And so I decided, I'm gonna go do this. And it wasn't, I don't know that it was that strategic. I mean, some people like, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to go market it and I'm going to do, and I ended up certainly tied to my business. But it was more something I felt this need to do. I'm a very determined person. I've told you all my other mini calls. There are lots of them, but I'm very, very determined. And so I decided, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to start going out, talking to a bunch of people. I'm going to get recommendations. I'm going to figure this out because I know I have this desire to do it and get some of this stuff out. And so it was so tied into what I was thinking about. It kind of came naturally in some ways. It was a ton of work, a lot more than I thought, honestly. I'm like, write a book. Oh my God. And so that, and then this most recent second edition, I updated probably 25-30% of it more.
Nice.
Added some, maybe 3 or 4 wave makers. I added some stories that, some of the stories I had before had gone a little stale, updated those. But the core principles and many of them, and some of them we've talked about already, actually.
Yeah, totally. So the making waves, what's the whole idea behind that? Like, I can imagine, it's like you go into a situation and you make waves.
Well, I kind of wrote it because make waves is kind of like somebody that messes stuff up. Like
Yeah.
it was sort of that idea that if you're going to do something different, if you're going to start a change, whether in this case, let's talk about starting a business, you've got to take the first step. You've got to move. All these, there were certain habits and behaviors that I ended up studying a lot of wave makers. I'd watch clients up close, and I kind of came up with this wave maker profile. And it, some of the things were, start without all the answers. If you're waiting for all the answers, you're going to be still working on the website.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Some of that. I think also just a lot of learnings, like, you don't know everything you need to know. So just, you're really smart and you're great. And you're
Well,
cool.
you emphasize the I can figure this out mindset.
That is huge because I don't know how to do it today. I'm clueless on this, but I can figure it out. That sounds like a really simple thing, but almost everybody that I talked to that was a wave maker, that was sort of their mantra.
Yes.
They weren't this, I know everything. In fact, people started businesses that they did not know what they were doing. But they had that mindset.
Yeah, I have a sign here that says everything is figure outable.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's another way. That's a better way to say it.
Because for me, I'm always thinking, like, if anyone comes to me with a question, I'm like, listen, I don't know, but I know there has to be an answer. Like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep, like, working until we figure this out because I know that there's a solution to this,
That's right. And I think when you're, like, starting a change, leading a change, starting a business, that sometimes is counter to, you have to have all your facts. You have to have all your information. You need to know everything before you start. If you are waiting, if you have the answers, I think one of the quotes in the book is, if you have all the answers to everything, you've waited too long, right?
Yeah.
You're too slow.
Right.
And so that ability to kind of start, adjust, figure it out, experiment, try, learn as you go. That was very common because any change you're doing, even if you're starting a business, which is what your listeners are thinking about, you haven't done it before.
Right.
Okay. So you're going to have to learn your way through it and just being kind to yourself.
Well, and that mindset, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like knowing that you're going to be like there's going to be some times where it's not comfortable, and that's okay.
That's good. If you're uncomfortable, that means you're pushing yourself a little bit. None of us like it. I don't like it. But if you're uncomfortable, then you're pushing yourself. You're stepping out of your little zone a little bit. And those things, are important when you're doing something different that you haven't done before. Also, I think adaptable planning, people that kind of like, I know my direction, but I'm going to, just like the kid in the maze at the playground, I'm going to hit a wall, learn, adjust. That's the way it's going to go. And if you can feel comfortable and feel good about that, that will be a really important, I think, for your success in any kind of change.
Yeah. So, you led a company for 2 decades, right? I mean, that's kind of, close to it. What would you say, were some of the like best lessons that you learned, especially as a leader, like as a CEO, like what are the things that you needed to develop in yourself to like help you achieve great things in that role?
That's a great question. And I can think of quite a few. One thing I will say, and I think this is true for any leader, not just entrepreneurs, and back to the I can figure it out. It's like, I always find people, and I struggle with this too, the blend of being honest and transparent, but also being hopeful. And to your point, being positive. How do you do both of those? So sometimes situation isn't fun or a client is challenging, so I kind of always kind of got that blend of acknowledging, I understand this is difficult. This person is extremely difficult. Let's figure this out. I get you. I understand. I understand what we're dealing with here. How do we move this forward? How can we figure this out? The more of a being real and honest about the difficulty of a situation while also moving forward. Because the other thing is, I think you can find with teams or even with clients, sometimes acknowledging that a situation is hard, people can go in a hole. And the next thing you know, you're admiring all the problems for way too long. Understand the problems and move on. I think that's one. So it's the combination. I think being a realistic, hopeful person,
Yeah.
honest, transparent. I think also trying to, as a leader, staying one step ahead of your team, because you can. That's kind of related to this. It's like, well, what's coming our way? What are we going to do during COVID?
Yeah.
We had a different strategy of like, guys, market is scary right now. It turned out to be
Right.
one of our best years, but
Wow.
scary right now. But it's like, okay, let's go for. We kind of jokingly we called it kind of the nooks and crannies, like, well, the smaller projects that maybe we wouldn't take typically, or we wouldn't focus on. Let's don't be too grand. Let's just go out and try to help people where they need it, even if it's not typically what we would do, and maneuver our way through this really scary market. And we did. So, I think trying to help people, trying to stay one step ahead of what's coming your way. There's a bunch of them. I think on that, and I think also back to what we talked before about where's the business going?
Yeah.
Because you've got people in your teams, they're focused on their work, they're focused on the client, they're focused
Right.
on whatever they're being asked to do. Your job is to be more forward
Yeah.
thinking.
Visionary. Yeah.
And to me, visionary sometimes scares people. Like, I'm not a visionary person. Sometimes it just means you need some space in your week to think. If you're firefighting all day long, and if you own a business, that is not hard to do, right? You have 4,000 emails, calls coming in, you're on calls all day. So you've got to have a chance to pause. Well, what have we learned in the last few months? What do I want? Where are we going with this? I could go on, but those are a few
Yeah.
mind.
No, that totally makes sense.
You gotta stay in that little bit. Got just look a little bit ahead. I'm not talking 2 years, but a little bit ahead.
Yeah. And in this book too, right? It focuses not only on your business life, but your personal life as well. And so all these principles can apply to both. And really, I think the better person we are at home, the better person we can show up for at work. And, for our teams and things like that. So that's important. What is some of the stuff that in this second edition, because it came out this past September, or when did it come out? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so what are some of the things that you refreshed, or like that you saw like, oh, this is a new trend that we need to add into this?
Right. I had a lot more about our thoughts, how our thoughts drive certain, obviously how we feel, and then our actions. So I added more on that. I could have gotten a lot more into brain science and all that, but I didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
But just more knowing, like, what are you thinking about? What are you letting? Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, and being willing to kind of manage your mind, because if what you're thinking about is going to determine what you actually decide to do. And so I put a lot more in it around that, managing your thoughts, knowing like earlier about your triggers. What are your obstacles that sometimes they just get in your path, and you can look at them in your personal life, your work life. Anytime you've gone through changes, what are your go-tos? Knowing what those are can really help you if you're trying to do something new, to be able to feel bold enough to step out and do it. So that was one of the biggest content areas. Some of the others I didn't change as much. Like one of the chapters is on resistance, and I'm sorry, resistance has been around. It's gonna stay there forever if you're doing something new. And sometimes we have it within ourselves.
Yeah.
I can't do that. Or oh no, too hard. It's like internal resistance, but you also get resistance from other people, and it's gonna happen. So, anyway, I think the thoughts and how
that's big.
That was one of the biggest content additions for sure.
Yeah, which I think is so important because, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and I've seen so many people come and go over that decade. And I think the biggest thing is really that mindset and the thoughts and how you discourage yourself. We're our biggest critics, and we see all of our faults and how we don't measure up and how we, can fail at so many things. And so it's like, man, if you can keep those in check. And what I find is that a lot of times if you push through, pain or the discomfort and the hardships, there's great reward on the other side of that.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
And growth and opportunity. So
For sure. And I think one of the things that, talk about your mindset and what your thoughts are in your head. I had come out of a world in business and consulting where it's a very much action-based environment. What are you going to do? That's all we talked about. Project plans and what were you going to do and what were your actions? And that's common, right? A lot of times but you've got to take a step back before you get there. And are you doing the right things? How are you thinking about it? So that was the really big new ingredient, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So did you have a identity crisis at all? Like when you exited the business, as far as what am I going to do now? Or where do I go? I mean, obviously you wrote a book and you probably do speaking and things like that, but what do you envision yourself? Like what's phase 2.0 for Patti?
Well, I'm still on a board and very involved in that.
That's
and
good.
I've done some coaching advisory. I've done a few things, but it's funny, identity crisis. I didn't have an identity crisis as much as, what's so funny is I had a pace crisis. I had been used to
just go.
And I kind of took pride on the fact that, and I could do it. And I have friends and be like, oh, your job doesn't seem that stressful. Like, okay. I'm glad you think that.
Right.
But, and so for me, at first I thought I'm doing something wrong because my pace is not frenetic. And I'm masking it all the time. I mean, that was sort of my go-to. I can remember one of my colleagues said, you don't have that cortisol flowing through your brains, your veins all the time, And so that pace, it took me a minute to realize it's okay. And now I'm still doing very involved in business, but doing things I enjoy. Yeah. And it's just at a different pace than what it was. So my identity was not so much the issue as my norm. What was my normal? What am I supposed to be doing? If I was not at my desk at 7:30, what am I doing?
What am I going to do? Sit by the fire and drink coffee and think?
I can't do that. And it was because that was my norm, right?
Right.
That has been my biggest adjustment. And now I'm kind of like, I have some space to think and do some other things that are interesting, still in the business arena, but not with the demands. So it's been really nice for me, but it did take me a minute. That's a great question and comment from everybody else I talk to,
Totally.
Yeah.
And what about your kids? I mean, have they delved into any entrepreneurial endeavors, or has anyone gone down that road at all?
Not like me. One entrepreneur, but not business. They're not business as much. The other one is a senior project engineer, real, analytical, smart. Yeah. The other one is more creative, but there was never like you talked about, maybe the kids will take it over.
Yeah. No.
Neither one. I mean, both, really smart, interesting people, but that was never, that was just never their next phase, nor did I ever want to make them think somebody needs to. No, it didn't work that way. So yeah.
And then, do you have any grandkids or anything like that yet?
No, not. Okay. Well, I have I have 2 step grandkids. Okay. And I have 2 step kids who also have. Allison has her kids. Okay. So nice. They are grandkids in that way. Yeah. Obviously, we're all very close family, and nice. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, we have a very big family, a little big family dynamic. Nice. Although all 4 kids are in different places, so
okay. So then you're traveling.
Good traveling. Good chapter. Good chapter for me right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed our hangout and our conversation, and if people wanted to maybe connect with you more, or have you come speak or get your book, where's the best place to connect?
Safest thing, book on Amazon. Safest way to connect with me is PattiBJohnson.com. There's a good way there to stay connected, find out more about what I'm up to, and that'd be great.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, we always love to leave people with one action item for the next week. It's like, okay, what can they do? So what's one small wave someone can, who's listening to right now, what they can do to start, next week off right?
I would encourage you to say, what is your big dream? What is it you want to do? You're listening to this podcast, probably picturing maybe you have this business in mind or you want to take it to the next level. I would encourage you on this Friday to think, what is the one thing I can do this week, not next week, this week, that will move me forward in that direction? Maybe it's go talk to somebody. Maybe it's, go spend some time on your own thinking about what you really want. But whatever it is, what's one step that's going to move you forward this week?
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much. And hey, thank you for listening to The Friday Habit. If you go to thefridayhabit.com, you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit system that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of always in your business. You can also shoot us an email or a voice memo at hello@thefridayhabit.com. And until next time, remember, live every day like it's Friday.